So today I have with me Trent Taylor. Trent, we met probably, man, I don't know, 2, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. I don't know when it was. It was at an adoption conference. And I sat in a breakout session with you and your mother. And I was intrigued by the topic and how it fit in with what I was there for. But man, you guys just, it blew me away because of what your story is alone was amazing. But then it opened my eyes to so many things that I didn't realize. So Trent, thank you for being here today. I know you got a busy schedule, but thank you. You're actually in North Carolina, correct?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
You have an amazing story. So let's start with that. Let's talk a little bit about where you're at right now and what you're doing, and then if you want to go right into your story and tell us.
All right. So, I'll just start from the beginning, So, honestly, every time I think about, when I came into the world, the main thing that keeps coming to mind is the fact that, I was born into a family filled with extreme dysfunction. There was so much pain, both physically and emotionally, and it truly is difficult to describe everything that I experienced.
Hmm.
But during the first 4 years of my life, I experienced domestic violence, extreme neglect, and sexual abuse. And then at the age of 4, my siblings and I were removed from my biological parents and placed into foster care. And when I entered foster care, I thought, okay, things might be getting a little bit better. And actually, at first, I wasn't aware that it was foster care because I was in a kinship placement with my biological grandparents at the time.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I thought maybe, some of the pain will start easing up. But unfortunately, just because I entered foster care, it doesn't mean that the pain stopped because my older brother, who was also my sex abuser, remained with me and my younger brother through most of our homes. So I can recall so many nights just praying, calling out to God for just some sort of peace to just deliver me from this pain and for it just all to just kind of just go away. So I wanted the pain to stop and to be in a place where I felt loved, in a place where I could feel like I could call it my own. I wanted a family to just love me and keep me safe. But unfortunately, it took 5 years to get to that place. So for 5 years, I continued to bounce around from foster home to foster home, from school to school, while the abuse at the hands of my older brother continued. And I can tell you one thing is that I can remember so vividly just simply crying myself to sleep at night, just
Hmm.
calling out for help, and it seemed like there wasn't any hope. But at a match event that I was at, I was given a dog tag with Jeremiah 29:11 engraved on the front. And seeing that verse for the first time and reading that verse, that is what gave me hope. And that is what got me through my time in foster care. Just knowing that God had a plan for my life and that God, was going to give me that hope. It was just on His timing. And then that allowed me to dig deep and find some sort of patience to help keep me going through my time in foster care. And then around the age of 8, my younger brother and I were placed in my adoptive home. And I would love to say that just because I entered an adoptive placement, that everything was going to be wonderful. Everything, like the pain was just gone, that the trust was there, the love was there, you know.
Hmm.
And it was on my parents' side, they gave me that love. They showed me that I could trust them. But for many years, I didn't trust them. I couldn't trust them because I had been hurt by so many people in my life before them that it was practically impossible for me to trust anybody or open up to anybody. But through their persistent love and always pointing me back to the healing found in Christ, I slowly started to, bring my walls down and was able to open up and share all the pain that I had gone through. And, over many, many years, I was able to come to dramatic levels of healing because I was able to find healing in Christ and from the love and support of my adoptive family and their understanding of trauma and how it affects, those who have experienced it. And as a result, in going through that healing journey, I realized that what the devil meant for evil, God can use for good and for his glory. So I was like, well, if God can use this for his glory, then who am I to stand in his way? So that's what really
Yeah.
fueled my passion to help make a change and help others overcome their past trauma or their past struggles or whatever it may be. And that's what I've dedicated my life to. So right now I am in college, finishing up my bachelor's degree in family and human development. And after that, I plan to dive fully into my ministry called Watch Me Rise and give back to families and give back to children and continue public speaking and mentoring and just giving them the same hope and healing that I've been able to find while pointing them back to the ultimate healing found in Jesus Christ.
Wow. Yeah. I actually forgot some of that story. And the thing is, that's really what our podcast is all about is stories, sharing stories like yours, people that are brave enough to say, man, this is what I've gone through. Some of the stuff we don't want to talk about, but for you, especially the things that you dealt with, having you come forward and share this, how many lives have you already touched? I mean, I know in that room that day, there were a lot of people that were just glued to your story and impacted greatly. I actually didn't meet you that day because there were so many people lined up to talk to you and your mom. I had to move on, but it was just so intriguing that this young guy, you're now, how old are you now?
I'm 21 years
21,
old.
21 years old. You're just now legal age, and you've gone through more than most people will ever go through. And here you are, giving glory to God for bringing you through that and sharing about it. So, man, I'm so proud of you and happy for people like you that are willing to share the hard stuff. So, let's talk about your story. You said it. So you had like 8-9 years of not even knowing what trust was. So to be placed in an adoptive family,
Yes.
I mean, like you said, your parents were like, okay, this is going to be a great thing. But man, for you and your brother, you had no idea what trust was. You had no idea what a functional family was. You had no idea what love was. Um, so can you share some of what you went through in those first 8 or 9 years?
Yeah. So, if I had to describe, you know, the theme of my life, it would have been fear. Fear was, my whole existence, the unknown, the uncertainty. I had no idea, where my next meal was coming from, where my next bed was going to be, because I had moved so often. I didn't know if I was staying with, in this home tonight or if I was going to get moved, because there have been some times where it would literally be like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning and we'd have to pack our stuff and go, so it just, for both my brother and I, we just had to shield ourselves and build this protective emotional wall, because if we didn't, it opened us up for, to be vulnerable and to, risk being hurt. And we'd been hurt so much that we just couldn't risk it again. So for so long, for the first, 8 or 9 years of my life, before, being adopted, I couldn't trust anybody. I couldn't let anybody in, because when I did, you know, I was
Yeah,
hurt in ways that, are still with
sure.
me to this day, so it just was pretty much impossible to open up and trust.
Yeah, and I can't imagine. I mean, I watched my two kids be raised. They knew they had unconditional love. Every night we tucked them in, prayed with them. They knew when they were hurt, whether it was physical or emotional, they knew where to go to. You didn't have that. Um,
No.
and the thing is, aside from the sexual abuse, you were also introduced to pornography at a very young age. Can you talk about that and how that affected you? I think most people feel like, pornography really doesn't affect anybody. It doesn't hurt anyone. So what's so wrong with it? And I think you experienced that in real life.
Yes, for definitely. To those who think that pornography is harmless and that it doesn't do any damage, I can tell you that it is not true. I am a walking testimony to prove otherwise. So, my biological uncle, who was my main sexual abuser at the time, introduced me to pornography at the age of 2.
Mm.
So, from age 2, I had all these images of pornography in my head. I had absolutely no idea what it even was. I had no idea what I was looking at, and that night stayed with me for many, 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 many years. And it was a struggle. It certainly was. And when I got old enough to have access to technology, because of what I had been shown, that carried on to how I used technology, many years later. And through the help and guidance of my parents, they caught me on my grandma's computer, looking at stuff I shouldn't have been, and I told them, like, I didn't know it was wrong. I was shown this at 2 years old. No one ever told me otherwise. So, instead of like pummeling me with judgment and making me feel shameful, they came alongside me and said, okay, well, let us teach you why this is not
Mm.
okay.
Yeah.
Let us show you, why this is not appropriate. And that approach really helped change my perspective on pornography. It showed me that, what I was viewing was not biblical. It was not appropriate, and that, this is not the way God has designed sex to be, not even
Yeah.
close. So once I learned that from a place of genuine love and just concern that they had for me in my life, I was able to, just slowly start to, work against it. It wasn't easy. There were numerous times on my journey to fight against pornography that I would fall back into it. I would stumble. I would, sneak and look up things I shouldn't have, you know, but with enough consistency and over numerous years, I was able to finally break free from that. And even now, as a 21-year-old man, I still ask my parents to set restrictions on my
Hmm.
phone. Not because, I still fall to temptation, because thankfully I haven't fallen into temptation for many, many, many years, thankfully. But I've always been the kind of person where the best way to get out of a situation is to avoid it
Right.
altogether. So I'm not gonna, like, I don't want to open the door for Satan to, throw that temptation at me. So, and honestly, even though I had viewed that stuff, 10 or more years ago, it still sticks with me every once in a while. Every once in a while, I feel like Satan just throws those past memories back at me, and the way I usually describe it is that, pornography, it's like an iron on your brain. It sears those
Mm.
images into your
Yeah.
brain, and it is almost impossible to get rid of it. You will have times where, you might forget about it, or that you may not remember, but every once in a while, those images and those things surface. And and research science has shown that pornography is as addictive as heroin and cocaine, and it does the same. It changes the brain in the same ways as drugs.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's one of the things that I had not really understood until the day you guys shared that. And I'll put a link in the show notes, several links in the show notes, but one of those is your brain on porn. Lots of statistics about this. This is scientifically proven.
Mm-hmm.
It rewires your brain. And I think the hard part about this is that God has wired us to desire sex with our spouse, and it's a good thing. And I think that the world, like everything that God has given, God has given us those good things, but the world has perverted that and twisted that. And I think that uh, it's so addictive because it's a part of our nature.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is, by viewing all of that, you start to get you get this desire that is not natural, and pretty soon you start, as you watch pornography, as you go through the things that go along with pornography, you start finding fulfillment in those images and not in a person. So it kind of distances you from reality, which again is your brain on porn. It rewires everything. And it does. I like the image of the iron searing your brain because that's exactly what happens. Back in my day, you had to find a magazine. There was always the guy in class that found a pornographic magazine somewhere. And so, the guys would go over to their house, and it didn't happen a lot. That's the other thing, is it didn't happen a lot. But when that happened, that's how we viewed that. Again, it's a natural curiosity at that age. But now everybody walks around
Mm-hmm.
with the access to pornography right in their pocket. That's the real danger right now, is that it's so accessible and it's such a secret sin that nobody wants to talk about it. The church is not talking about it. So how did that affect you? 2 years old. How did that affect you moving forward in your life? Because now you're dealing with the sexual abuse, you're dealing with and the severe neglect. So you're dealing with all these things, no trust in your life, no real love in your life, and now you get this pornography issue on top of it that is, for a 2-year-old, doesn't seem like it should affect you at all, but it did.
It most certainly did. I mean, I was just left so confused and just like not even understanding what I had just saw, what I had just seen, or what was even going on. So it just caused a lot of confusion for me, and it taught me that that's what happens when you get older. That's just the way it is. Because before that, nobody had ever taught me otherwise. No one wanted to
Right.
talk to me about what sex was, how God has designed it, how God has designed us to treat women. And so it kind of just like altered my whole perspective on everything in that nature, and I just was just left confused and kind of in a sense traumatized from that, because as a 2-year old you have no idea what that is. It's just you're left kind of just in a sense like freaked out and just left
Hmm.
wondering what was that.
Part of your story is adoption,
Mm-hmm.
which I have a long history of adoption. My daughter was adopted from China. It's a beautiful thing. It's not always an easy thing. Your situation wasn't easy because clearly you had a lot of baggage, for lack of a better term, that you brought into this adoption. Let's talk a little bit about that and how your parents really helped you through that.
Yeah. So, by the time I came to, my adoptive parents, I carried with me trust issues, lack of a lack of the ability to not be able to attach. I had, pain from sexual abuse, pain from neglect, pain from experiencing domestic violence between my biological parents, the tremendous pain from pornography exposure. I had so many different traumas that had, accumulated over most of my life leading up to that point, that I, brought into with me into my adoption. And at first I kind of just tried to keep things to myself. I tried to get a gauge as to are these people really going to stick it out? Are they really going to be here for me? So in order to test that, what I slowly started doing was I would drop little things about my past, like I'd be like, oh, I was sexually abused, and then just carry on the
Mm.
conversation like I had not just said that, just to see
Yeah.
how they were going to react. And I
Right.
can remember that at first they weren't really sure what did he just say. It's like they didn't really understand what I was saying because I said it so fast and just carried on the conversation we were having previously. But they never once judged me. They never once made me feel shameful or like anything was ever my fault. And actually, they always tried to work
Mm.
in the opposite way. They would always tell me that there's nothing you can say, nothing that you can do that will make us love you any less or view you any differently. You are our son, and we love you, and we will always be here for you. Now, I wish I could say that them saying that once or twice was enough for me to get it, but it wasn't. It took many years and thousands of times of them saying it and showing it through their actions that really allowed me to trust what they were saying is true, that they were really going to stand by me no matter
Yeah.
what. So as I started, telling them about my pornography exposure, my sexual abuse, the neglect I experienced, and everything like that, they walked my healing journey by my side. And that was the biggest thing. It wasn't me against my past. It was me, my family against my past, with God, leading our army and protecting us during that healing journey. And honestly, that is what allowed me to heal, and that is what has gotten me to the place I am today. Is their constant love. They're never wavering in their support for me, and never once making me feel like it was my fault or like I did something wrong.
Yeah, I mean that was so critical in that shift in your life because again, you didn't have any of those things that we as growing into that whole adoption process, you had none of the normal stuff to build on. You needed a new foundation, everything. So how important was that your parents understood that and walked with you through that journey of understanding what family really was, and what love was, what trust was, and you've made great strides. You spoke so well down at the event that we were at, and I was just again everything that was said, everything I saw was just truly amazing, and it was God's work in your life with tons of help from your parents, just doing the right things and persevering. Just the attachment issue had to have been a difficult thing for a parent.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine there were times when you just didn't know how to react to touch early on. What was that adjustment like early? Like as you came into the family, did you understand what was actually going on? You'd been from foster care to foster care. Now this is adoption. This is the real thing.
Yeah. So for me, when I first met them at that match event, it was like this, almost like this supernatural connection that we had for
Mm,
some reason. Like, cause I kind of I at that point I was able to understand more that this was for adoption purposes and things like that. And that we were here to meet people who might want to become our mom and dad. That's what we were told. So when I first met my adoptive parents, there was just something different about them, the way they interacted with us and the way they genuinely showed that they were interested in my brother and I. You know, I remember, after spending the whole day with them, you know, on the way back to my foster placement, just chanting in the car, these people are different. These people are going to adopt us. We're finally going to have a home. And after a while, a long period had gone by, and then our social worker brought us into the DSS office, showed us their video, that my parents had made for, to show these children. And
hmm
again, after I saw that, I just continued to like chant out loud in my mind that these people were going to adopt us. We finally found our parents. And a few months later, that came true. We got to move in with our adoptive parents. And, you know, it reality was starting to set in, like, wow, these people really are going to adopt us. But unfortunately, in
Yeah.
our situation, it took a year to finalize the adoption. And as far as I know, I think we still have the longest termination of parental rights here in North Carolina. It took roughly 11 days when it's supposed to only take a few hours to do so. So,
Wow.
between everything
Yeah.
else that I had gone through, and then I have people that I have like given my heart to, I've opened up, I considered them my mom and dad because they were. And
Yeah.
then I had to face more fear, more uncertainty, and just faced again with the potential, loss of being ripped away from someone that I actually was able to open myself up to. And so many people, that I've talked to go into this thinking that, oh, if we just give them enough love, that'll be enough. What
Yeah.
it takes to really connect with a child is understanding that it's not going to be easy. They're not going to attach to you immediately just because you give them a bed to sleep on and some food to eat. That doesn't mean that they're going to consider you mom and dad, because they've had that before and they've also
Right.
had that taken away. You got to be
Right.
persistent with it. You got to be patient with your child, with yourself, and just trust that in God's timing things will get better. But the biggest thing is being able to attach to your child. You have to be able to connect to them before they can ever open themselves up or really ever understand what you're wanting, from them. So like if your child is struggling with pornography and you don't have that attachment, or if you don't have that connection with your child, they're not going to listen to what you have to say. But if you make that connection and you make that attachment with your child, their trust starts to open up, their walls start to come down,
Hmm.
and then you
That's
can
right.
start helping them work through their struggles.
Yeah. That's so good. You also talked about, and you kind of mentioned it here in a way, is triggers. You had triggers along the way, the stuff with pornography, the stuff with even your diet. I remember you talk about triggers and how you still deal with those today.
Yeah. So a simple way to define what a trigger is any of the five senses that you associate with a painful experience. So for me, it was Hot Pockets and Pop Tarts because for so long that's pretty much all I ate in foster care, and
Mm.
therefore that became a trigger, and I no longer desired that food. Or the smell of cigarettes, because my biological father was a chain smoker, so the smell of cigarettes became a trigger. And because at first I didn't really understand why those things were bothering me. All I knew was that it was bothering me. So with the help of my parents, they helped me identify my triggers, and there's a term called name it to tame it, and I believe that's by Dr. Dan Siegel. And what that means is when you when you can see a trigger, when you see something in your child's life that seems like it's a trigger, help them put a name to it. It's like, so for example, cigarette smoke bothered me, but I didn't really know why. So my parents were like a detective. They saw, okay, cigarette smoke bothers him. Let's try to find out
Yeah.
why. And so we talked about it, and I told them that my biological father was a chain smoker, and therefore I was able to name that trigger, and then I was able to overcome it
Yeah.
over time. And the biggest thing is
Mm.
that triggers, if you can bring them into the light, if you can, put words to it, you can overcome them, and they do start losing their power. But the biggest thing is that you got to talk about it and you got to bring it into the light. So like for example, like if you're struggling with pornography and you know that in times of heightened stress that you're more likely to fall into temptation with pornography, well then stress can be that trigger for you. So therefore you need to be
Yeah.
able to identify that, wrap yourself around with loved ones, and find that support system so they can help you tame that trigger.
Yeah, that's so important. And I think all of us can walk away with some tools there because we all have triggers in some way. Like you said, even the pornography issue, such a such good advice there. You've gone through some schooling. You're headed towards just helping people. What other things have you seen going through your schooling that you're like, wow, okay, like an aha moment or that makes sense moment? Or are there any things that you can share that you've learned even recently through your schooling about what your past was?
Yeah. So honestly, the biggest thing for me when I started learning about trauma and how trauma affects one's brain chemistry, because it literally rewires how your brain functions. I was
Mhm.
like, wow, this is why I used to act the way I did. This is why I had those thoughts and
Yeah.
those feelings. So it helped me understand myself. And I think it's very important for parents to teach them, one, learn about trauma themselves. Two, help their child understand trauma and the effect it has on their brain, obviously at an age appropriate level for them, because if they can understand why, they can start to help move past it, and it helps them understand themselves better, and it gives them some of that power back, because you walk around feeling like you're just abnormal, or there's something wrong with you because you have all these
Yeah.
thoughts and you act certain ways and certain things bother you that don't really bother other people, and you just can't understand why you are acting the way you do, and that's because of the trauma we've been through. And understanding that was just like the biggest aha moment that I could have had.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah,
And I know
amazing.
that
And
you're
I
going
know
to
that
be
you're
a
going to be great counselor or whatever the future has for you, because you've lived it. You understand it better than anybody who's never been through it. Well, Trent, I know that there are people out there that are listening that are identifying very much with some of the things that we've talked about, whether it's pornography, some other addiction. Maybe it's parents that are considering adoption or foster care, and they're going, man, I've heard stories. This is a really broad question, but what advice would you give all of those people that are dealing with stuff right now that we've talked about? What kind of advice would you give them moving forward?
Hmm. Yeah, so the advice I try to give parents who are thinking about fostering or adopting is that, if you truly feel that God has called you to do this, God will equip you. It's important to seek as much information and as much training as you possibly can. Inform yourselves on what trauma is, inform yourselves on the importance of attachment. And another big advice is just be patient with your child, with yourself. Show yourself grace, show your child grace. And trust me, it's not always going to be easy. Your child will push your buttons, and that's what we learn to do as a survival mechanism. We learn how to read people, and we know
That's right.
how to get them upset if we want them to. So know that and be patient in that. And if you come to a point where you're like, I can't do this anymore, I just encourage you to fall on your knees and cry out to God and just be like, God, I can't do this anymore. I need your strength. And another important thing that so many parents forget to do is find support. Because part of what Watch Me Rise does is we
Yeah.
hold support groups for foster and adoptive parents and their children. Because, so many people try to do this on their own. It's just about impossible because you feel isolated. So I encourage you to
Yeah.
find people, find parents and other families that have gone through the adoption process, that have gone through the foster process. So that way you have someone to talk to, someone that understands, not just for you, but also for your child. And that's what makes our support groups different, is that we have support groups for the children as well. So that way they can understand that there are other kids out there that get it. Because, for me growing up, I didn't have that support system. I didn't have, other kids who understood what I was going
Mm-hmm.
through. And that's why I wanted to make
That's right.
sure that, when I got the chance to give back, that I made sure that they had a voice and make sure that they had an area where they can connect with each other. And honestly, it really is it's just so awesome to just see the light in their eyes when they just talk to each other and be like, "Oh, you have food issues? Well, I also had food issues, when I was younger. I struggled with a lot of the same things you're struggling with." It's like instant community. So the biggest things: learn about trauma, learn about attachment, keep God obviously at the center of everything you're doing, be patient with yourself, show yourself grace, and always try your best to find a support system. You can never ever get too much support.
But it's good advice. And, if you're in a church already, talk with a pastor. They've got resources they can point you to locally. Let's talk about Watch Me Rise, and how can people get in touch with you? Where can people learn more about Watch Me Rise? What you're doing? I'm sure that once you graduate, that's going to start taking off. I know that you got to really focus on your studies right now. Tell us a little bit more specifically about what they can do to connect with you guys and Watch Me
Of
Rise.
course. Yeah, so if you want to learn more about Watch Me Rise, you can go on our website. It's watchmerise919.org. And you can see all of our resources. We have books, we have Bible studies, we have support groups, we do specialized trainings, we do podcasting, I public speak to share hope and show how God has worked through my life. So if you want to just look on our website, you can see everything that we offer. We also offer behavioral consultations in which we will talk with the parents, the child, or both, and help them work through some of their struggles and some of their issues as well. And something that I've started recently is called Fostering Faith, which is a Bible study that I do both locally and virtually, where I gather foster alumni, people who are either in foster care or were in foster care or have been adopted. And we just twice a month we get together on Zoom or in person and we do a Bible study together. We worship Christ together. So we'll have one day out of the month where it's Bible study, another day where it's community and prayer. And I have found this to be so life changing for so many people, because what is better than
Yeah.
being able to connect with other alumni, than being able to connect with them and help one another grow in our faith and grow closer to Christ.
Yeah. Such good resources. I'm looking right now on your website. The public speaking, I know that you probably don't do as much of that as you'd like to right now with your schooling, but I would highly suggest, if you want your church to get on board, if you want your group to get on board with what Watch Me Rise is doing right now, you have contact information on here. Get in touch with Trent, with your mom. I'm telling you, it will change your life. It will impact you. And great stuff here. Talk about pornography really quickly. You are connected with an organization, a company that I absolutely love, Covenant Eyes. You have actually have a connection there as well. This is not necessarily the best program for young kids, but when you get into the teen years and on up to into adult, I think there's nothing better out there than Covenant Eyes, because it's all about accountability. You have a special code that people can use to try it out. Can you talk us a little bit about
Yeah, of
that?
course. So yeah, I've become an affiliate with Covenant Eyes after learning about what Covenant Eyes does. And I actually had a friend who used it and told me about it. Just fell in love with the idea. I think it's just such a smart tool to have, because it keeps you honest, and it keeps what you're doing on your phone, open to those who are helping you. So if you truly want to help battle pornography, and if you want to break free from the chains that pornography places upon you, I would definitely encourage you to sign up for Covenant Eyes, and you can use the promo code Watch Me Rise and get 30 days free to try it out. It's simple. It works on all devices. I'm an ally for several people through Covenant Eyes, and I have seen it do wonders in people's battles against pornography.
Yeah. So covenanteyes.com, sign up. Uh, Trent's promo code Watch Me Rise will get you 30 days free. You also have another great resource that you've written about pornography and parents. Talk a little bit about that.
Yes. So when I was roughly 17 or 18 years old, I wanted to create a book that would, help others fight against pornography and technology addiction. And so what I did was I wrote this book called Battling the Invisible Enemy, and you can find it on our website. It's a book that is centered in scripture and centered in the healing found in Christ, and it gives tangible tools and skills to help, fight against pornography, fight against technology addiction, and fight against the pull that it has upon our lives. And, I wrote it from a teenager's perspective at the time, for teenagers. So it's written
Yeah.
simply, easy to understand. And I also wrote it from a battle perspective, because this is a battle. This is not easy.
That's right.
And
That's right.
so as you read, you'll see how it takes you from like where you are now, and how it gives you the tools and the resources you need to build your army, which is your support group, and give you tools and skills to
Yeah.
help fight this.
That's awesome. Well, Trent, while we wrap up here, is there anything else that we missed? Anything else we want to touch on?
Yeah. So what I would love to share with others as we are closing is that this is not an easy journey. Your fight against pornography is not going to be easy. Fostering and adopting is not easy, but it is so worth it. So I encourage you to just be patient with yourself.
Mm.
Look to God for support. Look to Him for wisdom and discernment. And just don't lose faith. Don't lose hope. And again, this isn't easy. It probably will be one of the most painful things you've ever done in your life. But when you get to the other side of healing, you will be so grateful. It is the greatest gift you can give yourself.
Trent, we're going to follow your journey. I know that God is just getting started with you, so I would like to invite you back as your ministry, Watch Me Rise, progresses, as your education continues. Let's keep in touch, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much. I would love to stay in touch. I would love to be on future episodes as well. And just thank you for allowing me the gift to show people how God has worked in my life and allowing me to give him glory for everything he's done.
Yeah. He's working miracles, and he'll do it in your life too.